critics of the president will say that this is exactly why he is doing this in the first place, that he likes this idea of him being this strong law enforcement figure, that he is sending in the National Guard to places like Chicago and Portland to sort of be the tough guy, be the boss who's creating law and order. But then the critics would point out that, in Portland, it was a handful of protesters. It was really not very many. Same in Chicago. And they will say that the local authorities are perfectly well equipped. Of course, Trump and his supporters would say, well, if you're perfectly equipped to deal with it, why weren't you? Because there have been a handful of clashes for sure. And cynics would say also that Donald Trump is enjoying this because he is flexing his muscles and perhaps preparing for the midterms when things could get quite contentious.
We're going to head over to the United States to give you the very latest news coming out of Washington and beyond. I'm joined by the US reporter Harriet Alexander. Hello, Harriet. Good evening.
Hi, Kate.
Let's talk about who Donald Trump was entertaining today. He was hosting the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at the White House this afternoon. It was a chance for both leaders to thaw the frosty relationship between the neighbouring countries. Here's Carney's slightly less subtle attempt at doing just that.
You kindly hosted me and some of my colleagues a few months ago, and I said at the time, you are a transformative president. And since then, the transformation in the economy, unprecedented commitments of NATO partners to defense spending, peace from India, Pakistan through to Azerbaijan, Armenia, disabling Iran as a force of terror, and now, and I'm running out of time, but this is in many respects the most important.
The merger of Canada and the United States.
That wasn't where I was going.
There we go, with the former governor of the Bank of England complimenting Trump on his handling of the economy. Buttering the president up, Harriet, is this the way to do it?
I think he's very much taking a leaf out of the Mark Rutte book, isn't he? The NATO chief, or even Keir Starmer and King Charles. I mean, both of them have worked out a very effective, it seems, way of dealing with Donald Trump, which is to flatter him. I mean, he would have loved that reference to him being a transformative president. I mean, it's obviously quite a loaded phrase when you think about it, because he has been transformative. You can't really argue with that. I think there was a lot of bonhomie. There was a lot of backslapping, a lot of sort of good vibes. Trump said that the US and Canada have a natural conflict because of being so close to each other. Carney sort of pushed back on that a little bit, but it's undeniable that there is this tension between the two. And it's also undeniable that Canada, unlike the UK, unlike many other countries, has not managed so far to negotiate its way out of these tariffs, which are up to 35%. So that's really crippling their car industry in particular. So that's very much on the front of Carney's mind.
Anything else from this meeting today?
Well, I think it's being seen, certainly it's being spun as sort of laying the groundwork. The Canadians are saying we never expected to have a big deal today. This is more sort of setting the stage for what is to come. Trump was praising Carney as being a tough negotiator and a good man. I mean, that's quite high praise for him. So there was nothing agreed today, but I think the Canadians will be fairly happy about this, and they really need to, because, as I said, it is damaging the Canadian economy. It's also damaging the US economy because tourist numbers from Canada are down significantly, about 20% year on year. And Canada is the biggest source of international tourists to the US. So it's in both countries' interest, really, that they get this sorted out.
He was also, Trump asked a question by a reporter on the situation of the Gaza peace talks. And he made a comment on that, again, very close to making a deal, he said, and that the US will do everything possible to make sure everyone adheres to the deal once the deal is reached for Gaza. This was him being asked about a reporter whether he guarantees, or what guarantees he's giving, that Israel won't resume its offensive once it gets the hostages back. It's just a quick update on that one. Should we talk about the government shutdown as well, Harriet? Where are we on this? I mean, there's been no progress, has there? But is it Mike Johnson who's reconvening today?
Yes, and I mean, this is the 7th day of the shutdown. Of course, we're still a long way to go till we beat the 35-day record. We've been having votes pretty much every day on competing motions to get the bill passed and to unlock the federal funding and to resume normal activities. So far, they seem incredibly deadlocked on this. I don't think there's any light at the end of the tunnel in the next couple of days, but a couple of things are beginning to happen, Kate, that I think are of note. One is that airports are beginning to see this, are beginning to feel this. I went through JFK Airport at the weekend and it was totally fine. But actually on Monday, things were beginning to slow down at Newark Airport, which of course is a big one for New York, also at Denver. And at Hollywood Airport in Burbank, those slowdowns are continuing. And that's because the air traffic controllers are not being paid. They're supposed to be paid back pay when it all resumes. But Trump has today been saying that there was a memo issued by the White House which says that perhaps they won't be paid back pay. So I think that's going to make people certainly think twice about things.
Yeah, so this is a draft seen by multiple outlets from the Office of Management and Budget. General Counsel Mark Paoletta argues that an amendment to the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019, which Trump signed during the last government shutdown, doesn't guarantee furloughed workers back pay if Congress hasn't set aside money to compensate them when the government reopens. So that is what it pivots on. The president didn't promise that back pay was a guarantee while taking questions from reporters in the Oval Office today. So that is interesting. And Donald Trump says that he'll announce in 5 days which government programs and jobs will be permanently eliminated. These will be the direct casualties of this shutdown, Harriet.
That's right. Yes. I mean, it's a lot of political theatre. It's a lot of attempting to tighten the screws on the rival side because there's going to be an awful lot of legal challenges to all of this. Of course, if you don't pay the back pay, there'll be a lot of legal challenges to that, pivoting on this legislation that Trump himself signed, arguing that they are entitled to be paid the back pay, and the firing of federal workers, the mass firing of federal workers. That's also going to face an awful lot of legal challenges. But yes, it's designed to make constituents angry and upset, and therefore pressure their senators, their members of Congress, to try and get them back to the negotiating table. But so far, I don't see much sign of that yet.
Let's just hear Donald Trump speaking earlier. This is in the questions he got following the meeting with Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, when he was asked about the shutdown.
We have a lot, I'm not going to tell you, but we'll be announcing it pretty soon. But we have a lot of things that we're going to eliminate and permanently eliminate. You know, one of the things that we have is some advantage, you could say. But because of the shutdown, which I think they made a big mistake, we're able to take out billions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, I mean, looking here at what you've been saying, and eliminate is quite an interesting word. For someone who's going to lose their job, isn't it? It's not a very personal word at all. Let's move on to something else that Donald Trump was asked about during that news conference, or during questions with journalists after meeting Mark Carney. He was asked whether he would invoke the Insurrection Act, effectively allowing him to override the courts and deploy the National Guard into Portland. Remember, we were discussing with David Charter yesterday the fact that a judge had basically blocked use of the National Guard into Portland.
It's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple. We want safe cities. If you look at D.C., you would right now, Mark, you could go out, take your family out to dinner. You could walk right down the middle of the street. There is no crime in D.C. When I got here, this place was a raging hellhole where people would come from Canada, people would come from other places and end up getting shot. Nobody's being shot. The National Guard's been unbelievable.
Well, there you go. How easy is it for Trump to do this, Harriet, I suppose, is the obvious question. Can he exercise his power?
Well, I think he would very much like to. The real focus, as you said, is Portland and it's Chicago. Of course, earlier in the year it was LA and it was Washington, D.C. D.C., of course, a slightly different case because there Trump has much broader leverage, much broader control over what he does with the National Guard. But in LA, that was highly controversial when he sent in the National Guard over the wishes of Governor Gavin Newsom. First time since the 1960s that that's been done. And he's trying to do it again in Portland. In Portland, the courts have blocked it. In Chicago, they are trying to block it. But actually, the judge who's hearing that case has said that the Trump administration has until midnight on Wednesday to issue their response to it. So in the meantime, the troops are massing in Portland as we speak. There's members of the Texas Guard who are gathering at a town called Elwood, just on the outskirts of Chicago. The governor of Chicago, the mayor of Chicago, they do not want them there. And you can expect that the scene is being staged for some protests against their arrival in the city.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are blue-run cities and areas that Donald Trump is targeting. Many of them have a high black population, black community living within them as well. I just wonder whether those protests could turn nasty, whether there's a fear within these areas that that this will come back to hunt Donald Trump, or or will that be seen as the reason that Donald Trump then needs to send in the National Guard? It's tricky, isn't it? Because the protests have to remain polite. It has to remain very peaceful. Otherwise, Donald Trump's validated in his opinion on those cities.
Yes, and I mean, critics of the president will say that this is exactly why he is doing this in the first place, that he likes this idea of him being this strong law enforcement figure, that he is sending in the National Guard to places like Chicago and Portland to sort of be the tough guy, be the boss who's creating law and order. But then the critics would point out that, in Portland, it was a handful of protesters. It was really not very many. Same in Chicago, and they will say that the local authorities are perfectly well equipped. Of course, Trump and his supporters would say, well, if you're perfectly equipped to deal with it, why weren't you? Because there have been a handful of clashes for sure. And cynics would say also that Donald Trump is enjoying this because he is flexing his muscles and perhaps preparing for the midterms when things could get quite contentious.
Crikey. Just a quick extra one to run by you, Harriet, that you may not have seen, but I know you'll be able to comment on. 6 former US Surgeons General have written in the Washington Post today of their concerns about policy changes enacted by the Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They've warned that they are endangering the health of the nation. These are Surgeons General, the top medical posting in Washington, effectively, warning, and these are Surgeons General who served under both Republican and Democrat administrations. They identified changes in vaccine policy, medical research funding, a shift in priorities from rationality to ideology, plunging morale and changes to staffing as areas of concern. This is pretty damaging for RFK Jr. I wonder how much difference it will make.
In a word, not very much, I don't think. I mean, RFK Jr. has the absolute backing of Donald Trump. He's really on a crusade to make America healthy again. He's adopted that as his slogan. What he is doing with the vaccines is highly controversial. So the Surgeons General opposing this is not particularly surprising. If you remember, a few weeks ago, they held the press conference where they talked about Trump was just riffing off this idea of changing childhood vaccination schedules. And he was saying, well, if I were you, I would slow it down. You don't want to pump babies full of vaccines. And he was talking about things that he clearly didn't understand about, like vaccine for hepatitis, which can be transmitted through birth. And he was saying it's an STD. Don't vaccinate your baby for that. And of course, that's not the reason why. Yeah. The child is being vaccinated. So, a lot of controversy there, a lot of contention. This just feeds into it.
Well, look, thank you so much, Harriet Alexander. Always so detailed. Lots to go through there. US reporter Harriet Alexander there.